Good evening. Welcome to tonight's shiur. Tonight is the Sunday of Parshas Nitzovim Vayeilech, and we're going into the day of Chayelul, which is a special day in the Chabad calendar and Chassidish calendar. And I'm going to share with you, perhaps I've just shared it in the past, Rabbi Yosef Goldstein, otherwise known as Uncle Yossi, once wrote into the Rebbe a remez from a pasuk that Chayelul is a Yom Tov. There's a lashon of Fidik Rebbe saying that Chayelul is a Yom Tov. So he takes the pasuk of Yodel Hashem Chastov Nifloisiv Levnei Adam. Now this is in Tehillim, as you can see, chapter Kov Zayin, which we say every Friday before Mincha, and take a look at those letters. And I'm pointing Ches Yud Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. So you got the letters of the word Chayelul, of the words Chayelul. That is in the Rosh Tevis, in the opening letters of these 6 words, it spells Chayelul. Now take, if you're following my pointer, Yud, Vav, Mem stands for Yom. Vav, Hey, and Vav is 6 and 6. Is 12, and Hey is 5, that's 17. 17 is Tov. So in the Rosh Tevis you have Chayelul, and in the Sofer Tevis you've got Yom Tov. So he was excited with this remez, and he wrote it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responded very interestingly. Chastoi refers to Psochim Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and then Tach, which stands for Chuas Chen, thank you, al haTorah hayofe, for the nice observation. What is in Psochim Daf Kuf Yud Ches? I apologize for not putting it on the screen. There it talks about the chapter 136 in Tehillim, and that's what we say Shabbos morning. There's 26 verses ending off with the words Ki La'olam Chastoi. And the Gemara discusses what's the significance of 26 sentences of Ki La'olam Chastoi. And the Gemara explains that until Avraham Avinu, well, we have 10 generations till Noach, then 10 generations till Avraham, and then until Matan Torah, you have in all 26 generations. So you have 26 generations before Matan Torah. And the Gemara says you've got 26 generations nizoinin b'chastoi shel mokim, which were nourished and being sustained by the pure kindness, undeserved kindness of Hashem. So that's the reference to Psochim Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph on the word chastoi. And it looks like here that the Rebbe, although here this pasuk is not even the same words. That's Hodul Hashem Kitov Ki Le'olam Chastoi, Ki Le'olam Chastoi, and here it's Yodul Hashem Chastoi. Different phrase altogether, but the Rebbe is the Chayra picking up on whenever you have this idea of Chastoi, is this idea that we have Hashem gives us blessing and goodness, even unearned, and it's an investment, I guess, that we should give back. Perhaps he's connecting this to Chayelul, that this is a chesed from Hashem. He sends the Baal Shem Tov and sends the Alter Rebbe to have to bring in this light of Chassidus into the world, and it's up to us to appreciate and utilize it, etc. Okay, let's go on to our first halacha question. So this is a friend of mine who learned in a Kollel in Eretz Yisrael. It's a literature Kollel, and they don't necessarily say Korbonos. No, before Mincha we say Korbonos, so that's Vayedaber of Parshas Tamid, and we say Ketores. In Nusach Ashkenaz, Ketores is not said on a daily basis, only Shabbos, and the reason for that is that if you miss out one of the ingredients of the Ketores, and that's a serious thing. And the Ashkenazim were worried that they pressure on the weekday, you might forget to include one of the ingredients of the Ketores, and hence they only say Ketores on Shabbos. Shabbos people are more relaxed and not so much pressure, so that's when they have Ein Kelekenu followed by Ketores on Shabbos morning after Aleinu. So it's the same thing by Mincha. In Nusach Ashkenaz, there is no saying Ketores, so they start on the dot. As soon as it's the earliest time you can daven Mincha, I guess someone bangs on the table and Chazan starts Ashrei. So my good friend, so he wants to say Ketores. He turns to his Chavrusa, do you mind if we stop our learning 2 minutes earlier, so I should have a chance to be able to say Ketores? To which his Chavrusa said, hang on a second, if it's too early for Mincha, it's too early for Ketores. So this was a conversation, and so that's how how it came to me. Right. So now, here's the question. You've got the preliminaries of Mincha. Are they the same as Mincha proper? Now, the reason for this half hour, let's explain. You've got Chatzos, which is midday. The sun is at its highest point. And the Beis HaMikdash, they waited a half an hour after that, until they would do the earliest time they would do the Korban Tomid of the afternoon. Now, there should be a little bit of shade. There should be for sure, out of any doubt, that it's past Chatzos. So for the first half hour, it's perhaps not so clear that the sun has passed the midpoint in heaven. So therefore, they waited a full half hour. By then, you could already see the shade from the tall walls of the Heichal, of the Beis HaMikdash, and then they were confident that it's afternoon. So we have this idea that the Korban Tomid is a half an hour after noon. That's called Mincha Gedola. And therefore, also the time for davening Mincha is also set as a half an hour after midday. So the question is, again, the preliminaries, are they also included? So can you say Ashrei Korbonos? So here you've got the Botei Chabad, who is saying that you shouldn't be saying Korbonos earlier either, nor Ashrei before the half hour mark after Chatzos. What about, so then what does our correspondent do about his Ketores, etc.? Is it plausible that he should say Ketores after finished, everyone's finished davening? Okay, so then he'll have to sit up and say Ketores after Shmoine Esrei, after Aleinu. Like sometimes people come late, they say Ketores later. So would that be okay? So here in Botei Chabad, he's telling us if you don't manage to say Korbonos and Ketores before davening, you can say it after davening, as long as it's not too late in the day. So he has a reference to Shraga HaMeir. Then he refers us to Aruch HaShulchan and to Rameh Mifan. So let's look at those two sources. I didn't look up the Shraga HaMeir, who does say that the Beis HaMikdash, that the Ketores was done after Mincha. So let's take a look first at the other two sources. So let's take a look here. Here's in Shulchan Aruch. This is just the end of Shacharis, but it says here one should say Pitum HaKetores Erev Vayeilech Achar HaTefila. Pitum HaKetores should be said in the morning and in the afternoon, the evening and the morning after davening, and that is preceded by Ein Kelekenu, etc. So here, this is interesting. Whereas our minhag is to say Ketores before Shmoine Esrei, before Ashrei, the Shulchan Aruch tells us about saying Ketores after. Now that's actually was the order in the Beis HaMikdash. The Korban Tomid, the afternoon burnt offering, is slaughtered, and then the Ketores is done. Normally it would work like this. They would have the slaughtering, and the sprinkling of the blood on the Mizbeach would be done immediately. Then they would be taking it away to the washing area. They would cut up the carcass, and they would salt it and skin it, etc., whatever it was. And then afterwards, like an hour later, they would put the flesh of the korban, the organs on the mizbeach. But the actual shchitas haTorah and sprinkling of the blood was done, and then the Ketores was done. So it doesn't seem to be so terrible that Ketores should be said after davening. Here we have the Aruch HaShulchan, and he says about saying Ketores before Mincha, but after Mincha, one shouldn't say Parshas haTorah and Ketores nor Ashrei. And his Hiru al Zeh Me'od. I don't know how well known this is, but the Zohar is quite emphatic that it's not, one should not be saying Ashrei after Shmoine Esrei of Mincha. And as a result, if you are in a rush, you might consider skipping Ashrei altogether or saying Ashrei quickly and catching up with the Minyan, but not to consider saying Ashrei afterwards. There is a Botei Chabad. But meanwhile, he says to say one shouldn't say neither Tomid and Ketores after Shmoine Esrei. He doesn't explain why. Now let's look at the Rameh Mifano. Remember, Nachum Azaria Mifano lived in Italy. He was a contemporary of the Arizal, and he writes here about saying Ketores together with the Korban Tomid, and then the regular Shmoine Esrei. And he says that Eile Mesayim Gedolim, these the Korbonos and Ketores are great helpers. Lelamet Sanigurio al Hatfilo Habo Acharehem, to intercede for the welfare of the Tefila, of the prayer which is followed. So he's saying that saying Korbonos and Ketores before helps your davening to be more effective. Continues, one who says the Seder haTorah before Shmoine Esrei and Ketores after and says Shmoine Esrei in between, so he is missing out in this benefit. So there is, you can see here, emphasis on the Seder of Ketores before Shmoine Esrei, and that is what we normally do. I still think that in this case, where he hasn't got the time to do it before, because it's within the half an hour before Chatzos, within the half an hour after Chatzos, before the time of Mincha, the Chayra also that should be applying for Korbonos and Ketores, also not to be said there. Look, so we're looking for solutions. So another solution would be, perhaps it's in literature Minyan. I said the likelihood is that they daven along Shmoine Esrei. Perhaps whilst you could say Parshas haTorah, etc., before they start, once they've started Shmoine Esrei, but you'll be able to catch up. I was speaking to the Talmidim today in the Yeshiva Ketana. I was saying I'm not so keen about this idea that Avodas HaTefila should be paramount in Chabad, but this is the reality is that in literature Minyan, it's very often that Shmoine Esrei is very long. And so here's the question. So he says to me, if I start Shmoine Esrei later than the Minyan, have I still got the privilege of Tefila beTzibur, or have I lost that? I don't want to lose the zchus of Tefila beTzibur. So this comes into another question. This is the question number 2 on the list. If someone starts Shmoine Esrei a little after the Minyan, is that still called Tefila beTzibur? So what you have on the screen is from a contemporary sefer called Isha Yisrael, specialist sefer on Tefila. He starts off in the main text saying that the congregants and the chazan should start together Shmoine Esrei. He actually points out to an interesting thing about Rosh Chodesh. So in other circles, they put back the Sefer Torah after Krias Torah, then Kaddish is said after Avodat Zion, or Avodat Zion, the Sefer Torah put back whatever, and then they put on Rebbeinu Tams. That's in the Chassidish Minyanim. So they're not ready for Musaf. So a little later, they bang on the table, and everyone starts Musaf without a Kaddish. Our minig is different. Our minig is that we don't say Kaddish after Avodat Zion, and we put the Rebbeinu Tams without, and then someone banks on this. Well, some. Then after we've finished changing into Rabbeinu Tam to take them off, then the Chazan goes to the Yomid and says Kaddish, which should be preceded by a chapter of Tehillim. Should be a Kaddish, should be following after a chapter of Tehillim. Okay. So he's discussing this about the idea that when people are davening to be called Tefila beTzibur, they should start in unison. In the notes, he brings this from various sources, from Mishnah Berurah, etc. Then in further, he brings from Igros Moshe, and even if the people are not davening mamish in tandem, but it's still called Tefila beTzibur, because even if they started together, the likelihood is that this one is by Ata Kodesh, the other one is by Rafainu. So they're not going to be davening mamish in sync with one another in any case. So if it's a little bit earlier, a little bit later, he feels that it still could be that they're collectively davening at a similar time. That should be called Tefila beTzibur. He refers to Yabia Omer from Rabbi Yosef, and Iches Shlomo from Shlomo Zalman, Sel Chochma from Rabbi Stern, and where they're suggesting that so long as you begin your Shmoine Esrei whilst the tzibur are on for the first bracha, so then that you've started with you're doubting with the minyan, and possibly if the tzibur are during the first three brachas, that there seems to be a certain latitude that even if you don't start mamish with the tzibur, start a few moments later, you'd still have the privilege of Tefila beTzibur. Having said that, that might be good enough for Parshas Atomid, which is half a page. But for the whole of Torah, which is another over 2 pages, that probably wouldn't work, and therefore I'm left with the option of leaving it for after Aleinu. Right. So that's answering question number 2, and then the question is about Krias haTorah. I don't remember whether we ever did this on this shiur, and this is a question which is in many Botei Chabad, that they do have people who would come for Shachris and they'll stay for Musaf. Then you've got also JFK, as is known, the other people who come just for Kiddush, and then you want to keep them a little longer to be able to do Mincha. So in winter, you can daven mincha by 12:30. So then that works. But in summer, when the earliest you can do mincha is, let's say, gone 1 o'clock, 1:30, to hold on to these people, and they're not going to come back necessarily for mincha later in the afternoon. So here's a question: can I do so? Just to sit around twiddling their thumbs, as well entertaining as the rabbi may be, but everything has a limit. So perhaps if we can start mincha with Krias haTorah, if we can start 15 minutes before the Zman, we can start mincha with Ashrei and Krias haTorah, and then we'll may work it out that Shmoine Esrei will be started on the dot of Mincha Gedola. So there is legitimacy to that. Someone once wrote a whole article about this. A couple of things. When the Minchas Yitzchok talks about this, he talks about on Tanis, the fast of Asora B'Teves, or the 10th of Teves. That's on a Friday, and he lived in Manchester at the time. It's a very short afternoon, and Mincha includes Krias haTorah. So there was a request whether they could start Krias haTorah, Ashrei and Krias haTorah during that half hour after Chatzos, and then do Shmoine Esrei after the half an hour mark. And Rav Weiss, in those circumstances, did allow it. In other words, although Mincha per se has to be only half an hour after Chatzos, but Krias haTorah, which is a preliminary, there is room to allow it for that half hour. So there is room to be mekel, and same thing the Botei Chabad, etc. Now, in this article which I'm referring to, written by Rabbi Avraham Sternberg, so he's pointed to the fact that he's noticed in 770 also people doing minyanim for Krias haTorah during that half an hour. So I just want to share with you that it's this idea of rushing right after Musaf to do to daven mincha, to be able to, what's the point? The point is that you go home, then you can relax. So in the Matei Ephraim, in the Dinim of Rosh Hashanah, so he complains about this new fad of people doing mincha right after Musaf. Most people go home for Yom Tov. Now those who stay on to do mincha, so that they should be able to eat, relax, and they'll be able to relax until Musaf, till Ma'ariv. He says that's not they're not doing the right thing, because meanwhile they're rushing through mincha. You could say perhaps Musaf was so long and was so late, but he's concerned about this fad. So now in our shul, actually, we do have only Rosh Hashanah a mincha right after Musaf, and that is because there are several people who want to go to hospitals, etc., on Mivtza Shofar, and therefore, of course, that's a wonderful thing. And okay, but the idea of doing mincha right after Musaf, without a break, without kiddush, etc., it seems to be rather giving into a balabatisha pressure to be able to come home and just unwind, etc. Now, I want to say another point here. Here you have in Shulchan Aruch from the Alter Rebbe in Seimer Reish Tzadik Beis. At Mincha, before Krias haTorah, we say the Posuk V'ani Sefilosi. Why do we say this? Because this is following on from the previous Posuk about the people who are sitting at the gates and they're singing and drinking beer. And then it says V'ani Sefilosi. Said David to Hashem, Ribono shel olam, our nation. This nation is not like the other nations. The other nations, they drink and they get drunk and they have partying, whereas we, even though we have drunk, yet we come back for davening. Therefore, this has been instituted before Krias haTorah on Shabbos afternoon, to thank Hashem that we are not like the people who, other nations, other cultures, who indulge in enjoyment, in drinking a whole day, and even us, even the Yoshvi Kronis, even those who are not so learned, nevertheless, we've come back to hear Torah. So to say Banis Velosi is a privilege when you come back. I'm wondering whether you could say that if you did mincha right after Musaf, perhaps you should miss out that posuk Banis Velosi. It's out of place because you're doing it in order to rush rather than despite that you've had your meal already. One more point about that, and that is that in Sefer HaMinhagim, it tells us about having an interval on Yom Kippur between Musaf and Mincha. And it says, if possible, at least 3/4 of an hour. So what's the cheshbon? Why does there have to be an interval between Musaf and Mincha? So in Chazal, they talk about Moshe Rabbeinu at the time when there was the battle, I think it was with Amalek, and he holds his hands up in prayer. And there is an idea that that one should not hold your hands should not be holding your hands in prayer for 3 hours or more. In the Kisvei Arizal, this idea of a 3-hour maximum prayer session, connected with the Mishnah in Brachos, which talks about Hasidim Horishonim, who would spend an hour before davening, an hour davening, an hour after davening. So there's the idea of a 3-hour maximum, because the Moichin Atzmon, whatever that means in Kabbalah, doesn't last for more than 3 hours. Now, if Musaf Yom Kippur, which is close to 3 hours, if you then go into Mincha, so then it's going to be overstepping the 3-hour time limit, and therefore there's a preference to Dafka have a pause between Musaf and Mincha so as not to overstep the 3-hour time session. Okay, let's move on. Right. So here we have about drinking. If someone has to drink on Yom Kippur, of course, first of all, to understand that drinking even a small amount on Yom Kippur is an avera. There's a machlokes in Gemara between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. In Gemara Yuma, that's the last chapter, talks all about the fast. And is chatzi shiur min haTorah or chatzi shiur is midrabanan? Is having less than the punishable quantity, is that forbidden min haTorah midrabanan? Rish Lakish says it's midrabanan. Rabbi Yochanan says it's min haTorah. So to eat or drink a small amount on Yom Kippur is an isur min haTorah. Nevertheless, when there's a case where a person can't handle the fast and they do need to eat or drink, so then there's an idea of mitigating the avera, because having a larger amount would be punishable with Korbonos, whereas a smaller amount, less than prescribed amount, wouldn't be punishable. It's also in haTorah, but it wouldn't be punishable. So what is the prescribed amount for food? Is the size of a date, kisevas hagaso, and for drink it is maloi lugmov. Now, generally people translate maloi lugmov mean full cheeks. I challenge you to find anywhere else where the word lugma is used for a cheek. I looked up to the dictionary, and it seems to be more like a gulp, a full gulp. Fine. Comes along in the Gemara. So a full gulp. How big is a gulp? How much can you gulp in one go? Says the Yehuda Mashmuel, loy maloi lugmov mamish. Don't talk about a full gulp or a full mouthful. Ela kol she'ilu yisalkenu letzad echod. If you can push it to one side, vayeilech maloi lugmov. It looks as if you've taken a full cheek or a full gulp. Now, reading further in the Gemara, you see that maloi lugmov. So we've got maloi lugmov and kimaloi lugmov. Maloi lugmov is more than a revius. Kimaloi lugmov is much less. How much less we'll discuss in a moment. But meanwhile, so I have here this measuring cup, if you can see, and I try to fill up as much water I can fit in my mouth, and then I emptied it into this measuring cup, and it worked out. I think it was something over about 110 mils. Now, the Gemara does say very clearly that this goes according to each person. Whereas by food, there's a standard shiur of kisefes, but when it comes to drinking, then it's maloi lugmov is according to the size of the person's mouth. So no proof one to the other. Meanwhile, so we've got maloi lugmov, as I said, is over revius. According to Reb Chaim Noyer, revius is 86 mil. As I said, I measured about 110 mil. That's well over revius. Not quite shiur chazanish, but fine. Okay. Then we've got Reb Chaim Noyer translates this, and he says that this is quoted in Niti Gavriel, quoted from Reb Chaim Noyer, that exactly to work out what does it mean that you can push it to one side and it's visible, kimaloi lugmov, it's a bit difficult to work out. And he says what you can do is fill up as much as you can, and bulging cheeks and all, then empty your mouth of water into a glass, and then divide it and have it in half. And that is going to be the pochos mimaloi lugmov. So a half of as much as you could fill your mouth with. Again, I tried this, and as I said, it was 110. By me, it was about 55. With the boys today in the Mechina, we called a couple of volunteers, and one had a bigger amount than the other. But that would be the shiur of half a full mouth, and it's less than a revius by most people. By most people, it's going to be significantly less than revius. Probably would be in the region of 40 or 50 mil. By myself, it was 50 or something mil. For some people, it'll be a bit smaller. Okay. What I found, though, something else very interesting. So this is, if you're talking about the maximum amount to have in one go, 40 mil is about the size of an egg cup. Let's go, though, something else. There is a concept of a window. If you have small amounts within a window, it's considered a one unit, that window called Krias brass. If you have small amounts beyond that window, then they don't combine. It's not considered one session of eating. Now, what about when that's with food? We've got the din of Krias pras, the amount of time it takes to eat a certain type of amount of bread. What about for drinks? So we have here small sips drank within a certain time frame would be considered together like one drink. That's only if, now let's do this carefully, if you didn't tarry in drinking from the beginning to the end of that amount more than the time it takes to drink a revius. But if it took you longer to drink that amount of drink, more than the time it takes to drink a revius, then they would not combine. I'm going to discuss this in a moment, a little bit more carefully. Now, those who say no, that it's the window is the same as for food, and that is al k'dei achilas pras. So we have it two ways of when we're talking about what is the window for drink. Is the window, let's say, 4 minutes, 4 minutes, or 9 minutes, whatever it may be, of k'dei achilas pras, or is the window k'dei shetias revius? Shetias revius, I wouldn't give it more than 5 seconds. And according to the first opinion, you could have less than an egg cup, wait 10 seconds, have again less than an egg cup, and again 10 seconds, again less than an egg cup, and you'd still be, would not be in violation of Isur Koros. The Poyoli says like this: La'inyan halocho yesh lahachmir lechatchila v'lifse kesvora ho'acharein. The halacha one should be machmir lechatchila, according to the second opinion, and that's why we generally, if people ask for advice as far as drinking on Yom Kippur, we talk about a 9-minute interval. But what we're seeing here are this is the first time I noticed it, lahachmir lechatchila, which means that if it's going to be difficult, push comes to shove, you could actually rely on the earlier opinion, which is the much more lenient opinion, that so long as that there is an interval of 10 seconds, or whatever that may be, between one small amount and the other, you're still not in violation of Isur Koros. So that's what I found that very helpful. But if people can't manage, if people do have to drink and they can't manage to wait 4 minutes, etc., then they could have wait 10 seconds between one gulp and the next, and they're still within this. They still haven't done Isur Koros. Right, let's move on. Okay. So here's a question, totally different topic. So here you have a parsha of Tefillin. This is a Tefillin shel Yad, where you have the 4 parshas in one scroll. And instead of in Rashi's, the last one is V'hoyem Shemoya. In Rabbeinu Tam's, the 3rd parsha is V'hoyem Shemoya, and the last one is Shema. Now, the question here is, as you know, there is in the Sefer Torah, there are gaps, and there's what's called psuchas and stumas. Sometimes you have a gap which is from middle of the line till the end of the line. That's called a psucha. It's like open to the rest of the world. Sometimes you've got an enclosed gap, and where you have a gap, and then there's another word or a few words at the end of the line. So the gap is enclosed. That's called stuma. Now, in the Tefillin, the parshas are, each one is a standalone. So then you can't really follow totally the psucha and stuma structure. And yet, well, let's go a little more detail. Vayedaber v'hoya kiviyacha, end off with a psucha, so they're not a problem. The end of the parasha is open till as much as you want. Shema begins with a psucha, and therefore Shema can start at the beginning of the line. Shema ends with a stuma. So in the Sefer Torah, it'd be uvishorecho, and then there'll be another word or more at the end of the line. So that gap would be a stopped gap rather than an open gap. V'hoyem shemoya is a stuma at either end. So v'hoyem shemoya is typically written inset. And in order that so let's now read the Shulchan Aruch. Starts off with saying all the parshas of the Tefillin. This is Lamed Beis, Sif Lamed Vov. This is the Mechaber. All the parshas should start off Psuchos, apart from the fourth parsha, which is Vahoyim Shemoya. It should be stuma, and if it's not done so, it's possible. So that means that Vahoyim Shemoya should start off inset. There are those who say it's okay. Medinas Elu, even Vahoyim Shemoya starts at the beginning of the line. Fine. Well, back to the Mechaber, that the Kaddish Leeway Kiviyacho Shema, all of them start at the beginning of the line. At the end of Kaddish Li, the end of Vayeilech Kiviyacho, you have a large gap. Of a Soif Shema Ein Manichim Cholok. But you would not leave a large gap after Shema, because you want to have that it should be like creating a stuma of some sort. V'im Manichim, if you do need to leave a gap, it should be less than Kedei Lichtov Tes Oisius. It should be less than the shiur of 9 letters. This is all so that the gap at the end of Shema should Kivyochel be close to the beginning of Vahoyim Shemaya. There is a difference here between the Taz and the Alter Rebbe, how to work out the end of Shema and the beginning of Vahoyim Shemaya to be a stuma. I don't want to go into that too carefully now. Meanwhile, we have this problem that the Sofer, instead of doing a Visharecha close to the end of the line, let's say under the word Einecha or under the word Bein, he finished off well over 9 letters, yeah, well over, it's like more like 15 letter spaces before the end of the parsha. That's the question which was asked: are the tefillin okay or not? So here, as we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, it says at the end of Shema you should not leave a blank. And it should not, if you do leave a blank, less than the amount to write 9 letters. So now that wasn't followed. So is the parsha kosher? I think, I know most of us are not sofrim. I think there is value in learning a little bit about the intricacies. When you look at the parsha, it's a beautiful writing, and it's a piece of art, but it might be possible. Yeah, there's many more things in sofras than what meets the eye of amateur. I'm talking about myself too. V'im manichim hu pachos. Now here's the biur halacha. This idea that there should be a gap after Shema, lovely kuva ka'omar, it's not imperative. Rather, the lechatchila svirele. It's lechatchila. The Shulchan Aruch says it's not right to leave a large gap, because by leaving a large gap, that would be the way to ensure that the next chapter following it should be a psucha. Aval b'di'evet, after the fact. Even if there was left a gap 3 times the word osher or asher, 3 large letters, still, loines battle shem stuma, that does not disqualify as Vahoyim Shemaya not being a stuma at the beginning, because Vahoyim Shemoya is going to be inset in any case. And therefore, Vahoyim Shemoya doesn't become possible because Shema ended off early in the line. So the Mishnah Berurah says it's okay. One more point is that in a Rashi's tefillin, it would be Shema, and Vahoyim Shemoya would be the following column. In Rabbeinu Tamza mentioned, it's Shema at the end, and Vahoyim Shemoya is the previous column. So it may be less of an issue of the fact that there is this large gap. Honestly, I did not ask around. I tried to do a bit of homework on this. I think that the Sofer shouldn't have done what he did, but even if it's Rabbeinu Tam, but the evidence it is kosher. Okay. Let's move on. So here I have a question, number 6, and that is, the father and the daughter are home alone. They live alone, which is okay. And the father wants to bring over a male guest to stay overnight. Is there a problem of Yichud? And the answer is yes, there is a problem. Although a father with a daughter, no question of Yichud, but when the father is asleep, so then there is that man and the girl, and there's no shomer. if there'd be two people sleeping, then they would be shomrim, because you're looking at one, you're sure he's sleeping, then the other one, you can't be confident with two people sleeping. So two sleeping shomrim work, but one sleeping shomer isn't. So this is what you have here from the Nite Gavriel on the laws of Yichud. Even when you have a shomer who would be obviously would not allow anything untoward to happen in their presence. Nevertheless, by night that wouldn't work. You'd have to have two shomer. Okay. Right. Let's move on. So here we have a question of a family, shluchim, and they have someone, a girl who's actually shluchim in Ukraine, and they have a girl who's with them for Shabbos, and this girl has gone through serious trauma. Trying to get back to my picture. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. So whoever put on those scribbles can take them off. I won't have to bother with it. So now their question is, can they make a cake, which is like a large letter, digit 8? And this should be to entertain this child on her birthday, to make a fuss of her. So is there a issur of cutting up the cake, which is it like erasing writing? So I told them that's not a problem. And the explanation is writing means letters stuck to a surface. That's what writing is. But loose letters, which are floating around, which are not stuck to a surface, that would not be called writing, especially if it's only one letter rather than two. The minimum of a message would have to be 2 letters. And this you can see here, my source in the Piskei Teshuvos. So he writes here, when you have baked goods, which are a letter or a picture, that's not called writing, because it's not on a paper or any other surface. Therefore, it's not called tzura, it's not called writing, and it's just it's a shape, but it's not writing. And therefore, you would be allowed to cut it up, you would be allowed to break it. Let's move on. The next question was about a chassan who's getting married this week, and he's asking what happens about slichas. If he goes to slichas, does it affect their slichas? Does it affect his slichas? So, looking at the again, we're going to the Nite Gavriel. Just a second. So, here we have erasing. Shouldn't be so fussy, but yeah. So he writes that despite the presence of a chassan or a Baal Bris, slichas before Rosh Hashanah are said regardless. But he says, ein oimrim tachnun b'slichas. They wouldn't say tachnun in slichas. Now, for Lubavitchers, we don't know what that's talking about. But towards in der Welt, towards the end of slichas, there's a section which is said, and people put their heads down on their arms like we do in Tachnun Chatzos and Mincha. And that's this piece over here, Vayomer David el God, followed by Drachim v'chanun chatasi lefonecha. That is the Nusach Ashkenaz Tachnun for every day, and that appears at the end of slichas. So what the Nite Gavriel is saying, when there is a chassan, so the rest of the slichas would be said, but that piece at the end of slichas, which is effectively tachnun, that would not be said. Now, in our slichus, as you can see here, it says ein noiflim al pneihem. We don't have this minhag of putting their head down. The reason for this is, I think we discussed this a couple of years ago, and that is because sometimes slichus is said very early and it's still night, and there's a concern we don't say tachnun at night, because tachnun is arousing dinim, and so we don't say tachnun at a time of dinim, and because of this, that's also of, although we'll say those words, but there won't be nefilas apayim to avoid saying tachnun where it's still night. So as a result, in the Chabad Kimat, this is said, but not in the form of tachnun. So therefore, I don't think it makes any difference. As far as we're concerned, we just continue as usual. Right. That was question number 8. Question number 9. I know you may have gotten the first edition, which had questions 7 and 9 were identical. My apologies. And my thanks to 2 people who pointed out the mistake already on Friday, so I was able to correct it before Shabbos. So my question number 9 is the following. A family is hosting Sheva Brachas over Shabbos. Friday night, they've got all the food on, hot plates. Would they be allowed to, they've got some non-Jewish waitresses. Are they allowed to somehow indicate to the waitresses that they wouldn't be upset if the hot plates were unplugged, put away? So to tell a goy to do something which you're not allowed to do, we know there's a concept called amira l'nachrim, which is not okay. Then you've got this, we all know that there's this kind of playing around and not saying directly and beating around the bush, and that seems to be a well-known heter. Well, what are the parameters of that heter? So let's read this carefully. And what I have what you have on the screen is the following. Interesting. As you know, the Alter Rebbe wrote a Shulchan Aruch. This he wrote in his younger years. He was about 30 at the time. But later on, I'm not sure the dates for this, he writes what's called Mahadura Basra, a later version. And this is at the back of the Shulchan Aruch. There are several pages of densely packed small writing, very complicated stuff. And one of the things which he deals with extensively in the Mahadura Basra is about the parameters of what can be asked from a goy or not. So now what I have here then is someone by the name of Rabbi Yoav Lemberg. He took the Mahadura Basra and he analyzed it very carefully and made notes and comparisons, etc., between the original Shulchan Aruch and the conclusions of the Mahadura Basra. So this is what I've taken from that sefer from the back of that volume. So let's read carefully. In the Shulchan Aruch is written the following. If a goy brings a sealed letter, he brings a sealed package, a sealed letter, and he understands that it's part of that he should open the letter, breaking the seal. You don't have to tell him not to, because he thinks that part of his mission to deliver the letter is also to open the seal. And so who's paying him to deliver is the sender. Who's paying therefore to open the seal is also the sender. So when he breaks the seal for you to be able to read the letter or to really use the package, so he's under the illusion that he's doing so for someone else, not for you. But if he knows he's doing it for you, then that would not be okay. Yeah. So this is the Alter Rebbe is saying here that when a goy, even by their own volition, are doing things for a malacha for you, you'd not be allowed to tell them. You'd not be allowed to allow them. You'd have to be moiche. Tell them, don't do it for me. That is the position of the Shulchan Aruch. That if the goy knows he's doing it for you, you'd have to stop him. In the Mahadura Basra, it's evident that you don't have to stop him, and the reason being, because you don't have immediate benefit from that malacha. So let's explain. If the guy wants to light a fire for you to have light, or for you to have warmth, well, warmth is another story. If you want to light a fire for you to have light, then you have immediate benefit, and that's not allowed. So even though he comes by his own volition, can I switch on the light for you? She says, no, don't, please don't. Even though that means you're just going to sit in the dark. But if the guy asks the other way around, let's say to switch off the light or to switch off the hot plate, you don't have benefit from the off hot plate, not directly. Of course, you may have a benefit that is going to be the pressure in the room is going to be less heat in the room. There's going to be your bill will be a lower bill, but those are indirect. You don't, so the difference if he switches on a light, that you're not allowed to allow the goy, you have to tell them not to. When it comes to switching off a light or switching off a heater or a hot plate, you're not allowed to tell them to do it. But if they understand that you'd be happy for them to do it and they do it, that is allowed. So therefore they are allowed to, you're allowed to tell them we don't need the hot plates after the meal is served. And if they choose therefore to unplug them, you can allow them to do so. One last point which we have for today, and that is the feedback about the gluten-free matzahs. So a couple of people got back to me on this, about this. One of them actually contacted Rabbi Royd, who's the mashgiach, I believe, on behalf of Manchester Bezdin, who gives the hechsher on the Rakuzans in their Leeds factory. And he had said that they are mezonus, and no way are they hamotzi. So I was curious what he's talking about. So I actually spoke to him on the phone, to Rabbi Royd, and he explained to me that the oats in these crackers are not made into flour. Imagine it's rolled oats, and they are perhaps chopped a little bit smaller, but they're never made into flour. And therefore, the whole pilpul which we had last week of flour with flour, it doesn't really even, as far as their perspective, is that it doesn't become oat flour. It's just like chopped oats. And because of that, it doesn't, even if you'd say that the oats is the main thing, it's not a flour. Therefore, it doesn't become a bread. So to say, does the oat flour prevail over the maize flour? There is no oat flour. And as a result, they are of the opinion that it doesn't qualify as bread, which is frustrating because the one who asked me this question was asking whether they could use it for lechem mishnah. They want on Shabbos to be able to use this for lechem mishnah. According to the Rabbi Royd, it's not. It doesn't qualify as lechem. So, and he said there are other products, gluten-free matzahs, which are available on the market. They're much more expensive, but this was a little bit of a misunderstanding, and it never really fulfilled what the Bezdin were looking to get a product which will help celiacs sufferers to have something for lechem mishnah. This does not qualify. Had they instead used oat flour, then that would be a different story. And then that comes back to the whole pilpul which I had last week, whether the oats would kind of prevail over majority of other flours, or they would just hold their own volume, and you'd have to have a kazayas of oats rather than kazayas of the mixture. One last point on that. Another one of our listeners tells us, Rabbi Lee, shliach in Cambridge, UK, so has some people who in family who do have celiac issues, so they would make a bread with 51% of oat flour. It wasn't so convenient, it was runny, and he was concerned whether it becomes hamotzi, because the way the Halocho describes a dough is that you can knead it with your hands, and oat flour doesn't lend itself to becoming to be kneaded as such. So he says then they found a recipe where he could make a dough which he could handle and shape before baking, and that seems to be appreciated. And so he's offering that if people do have this need for getting an oat or a gluten-free recipe for making challahs, etc., is happy to share the recipe with them. And so there you are, Rabbi Lee in Cambridge. I'm sure it's not so difficult to find his contact details. And the last thing which we have was, well, this I'm going to still leave it as a question because we're waiting for people to come back with answers. What do you know of a connection between the dates of Tisha B'Av and Shmini Atzeres, or it could be Simchas Torah, whatever? Do you know of a connection between these two dates? I'll leave that. And I was challenged. I did not guess the answer. So there you are. You're welcome to send in, and the address to send in your answers is lubavitchshul@gmail.com. Wishing you a good night and